This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
As a child, we have our own views and perspectives on the world around us. We were anxious to see our friends, go outside to play, and enjoy all the benefits that young people have. Seeing the world with innocent eyes and all the possibilities that were in front of us. Imagine growing up in that world without being able to communicate or understand how to express your feelings. Instead of being open to all that life had to offer, you focus on only one thing. Imagine not being able to interact socially with other children around you. We now understand that all children have a different path. Adults are here to guide and instruct, never forgetting that some will look at the world through different eyes. I'm Kevin Donaldson here with Mike Failace, and on this episode of the Suffering Podcast, we welcome Paul Cimins to discuss the suffering of autism. Being personally affected by autism, Paul has chosen a different path to help guide others through that journey. Paul, thank you so much for coming in.
Hey, thank you guys for having me on your show. Really honored.
Before we get into anything, let's throw a big shout out to our marquee sponsor. That's Toyota of Hackensack. We don't trust anybody, but we do trust them. Go to toyotahackensack.com and let them find you a car. And your father learned how to work his car yet?
No, absolutely not. Listen, my father can't work so he's still got a flip phone. Never mind working a car. Get all the new gadgets on it.
So please go out and support those who support us.
If it's not a Cadillac Eldorado, my father doesn't know how to work it.
Yeah, with the old whale boats. So Paul, thank you so much. You're doing so much. You're a big name in the radio business, and I'm so grateful to have you in here. Plus, we're going to talk about a subject that I know is very near and dear into your heart.
And near and dear to me also. I mean, we had the conversation before.
Yeah.
It's something that pulls up my heartstrings.
Well, I can appreciate you supporting it because obviously it's a huge cause that a lot of people need a lot of help today. So,
well, the funny thing is, and we'll get into your personal story, but autism is a relatively new concept. I'm talking within the last probably 30 years, but I don't even know how old you are. But when you were growing up, there was one kid you can look back on it where like, he was just, something was off. Something was off.
Absolutely.
What do they call it? On the spectrum.
And chances are they either had Asperger's or autism or something like that. And, that's just how it was. But now that we've identified it, we can help them live a little bit more of a full life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like you said, I think, you look back, it's like you said, one kid, maybe you said, he was a little off, and
brilliant at certain things.
Very smart.
Unbelievable.
So the one kid I'm talking about, I won't say his name, but he was the most brilliant engineer. Him and his brothers, they were all pretty much the same. The most brilliant engineer. They used to take old scrap and they made a bicycle that was like 10 foot tall by welding frames together, or they made a go-kart out of a lawnmower engine, but it was an electric lawnmower, so they could only go 100 feet. But they were brilliant with it. But other things, I don't know.
Struggle with a lot of relationships, right? Not knowing how to make friends, or
absolutely.
They struggled a lot with a lot of those things.
But I mean, their mind works in different ways than ours. Like you said, they latch on to one thing. We got this kid in a town by me. I pulled up next to him one day. A friend of mine told me about him. He goes, "Tell him your birthday. He'll never forget it."
Oh yeah.
So I go up to the kid. I tell him my birthday. He looks at me. Go by. Drive down the street. I'll roll down my window. He'll yell out my birthday. He knows everybody's birthday. I mean, it's genius.
We used to have a kid that memorized the phone book. He could tell you his phone number, and at first he thought it was a little creepy. I was like, "Oh, that's just John Buckeye." That was. I don't even know if John's still around. So every week we take a question from our audience, and this week's question comes from Steve_M. What is a parent's job beyond raising and providing for your children? This one was perfect. I actually saved this one. We got this one a while ago, and I saved it for you. What do you think a parent's job is beyond the normal stuff that you're legally bound to do?
I mean, for me, you want to, number one, have your children live better lives than you, right? That you want to obviously.
It's every parent's dream, isn't it?
That's the dream, right? You want them not to struggle maybe as much as you do, right? But I know for like me, my goal was for my kids to make a better world for the future. And I think that was always reside with me, is that I want to see my daughter Now she's going to be graduating nursing school, perfect example. Like she wants to help others, right? And she wants to really go out there and make a difference. And I think that as parents, we can do that. We can empower our children to do that. I mean, my son, Jonathan, obviously we'll get more into it, but, is not speaking. He is the voice of Autism Radio, right? So he empowered me to speak about the journey.
The driving force.
And the driving force behind Autism Radio. So,
Mike, what do you think?
What?
Besides how to shave.
Hey, listen. The hair is growing in. You're just jealous.
I am. I'm very jealous.
You're just jealous.
Mine's going away. Yours is coming back. I don't know what's going on.
and I heard you say something the other day about he's got little peach fuzz going on.
Yeah, it looks like something else, but it's getting better this week. It's getting
Soft
better.
as a baby's ass.
So when I first met Mike 25 years ago or something, he had that. He looked like
the high and tight.
The gym teacher from Beavis and Butthead with the high and tight and the flat top and everything. And even up until probably 6 years ago, he had the same haircut. And then one day he comes in and it's gone. I don't know what happened.
Just didn't like it.
Oh, okay.
Like I said,
you look good.
Hey, thanks, pal. It's starting to go over like right here a little bit, And I didn't want to be like Merv from Impractical Jokers, with that just bald. So but I was in the hospital for 4 days and it couldn't shave my head, so I just let it grow. So now I'm going to keep it growing.
There you go.
So what do you think?
Put it in a ponytail.
What do you think? What's a job of a parent beyond the legalities?
I'd say molding and preparation. You got to mold your kid to be, an all-around person. Respectful. You don't want your kid to grow up and be that little punk, that everybody's talking about. I mean, that's one of the proudest things that I have. Every time I was around town, people would say, "Your kids are so respectful," and and that's what it is. It's teaching them the right way, and it's preparing them for the future. Like I said, you're gonna fail. You almost want your kids to. I don't want to say you want your kids to fail.
You want them to taste that.
You want them to taste a little bit of failure.
This is true.
Just because they don't think that everything is going to be given to them in their lives.
Absolutely.
Not everything about the way we were raised was bad. Not everything, nor was everything good. And then it swung so far. The pendulum swung so far. I see my position in my kids' lives beyond, feeding them and clothing them and all the normal things, is to take those things that were good, being respectful, like you said, opening the door. I'm a little old school with that. Yeah. Open the door for a woman.
Be a gentleman if you're a guy, right?
Yes, be a gentleman.
Be a lady if you're a lady, right?
Right. I teach them that. When we go to church, my oldest comes to church with me. There's an elderly lady. He'll run out and go grab her purse, and that's like a proud dad moment for
Absolutely.
me.
You didn't steal it, or just grabbed it and brought it in for her?
He looked through it, but there wasn't much in there. So I take the lessons that were good. I try to be introspective when it comes to raising children. I take the lessons that are good, and then there's some good things today that I try to work in there. Being accepting, being patient. Where we were raised, the way I was raised, I wasn't very accepting and very patient, but that's the way I was brought up, and it wasn't the right way. So my kids live in a different world with all new different problems than we have. We didn't have social media growing up, and it's a 24/7 bombardment of information. We went outside and played. But again, I played Nintendo and Atari growing up, so I let them play video games, but I also we go outside and the joy of the outdoors, the joy of playing sports.
You got to let kids be kids, Let them be kids. Let them go through that whole experience. But there has to be a point where you have to teach them what it's like to be an adult, and like I said, lay the groundwork for their future.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were kids, Mom would say, "Okay, go to your friends, go out and play, be home for dinner." Mm-hmm. That was it. There was no cell phones, no.
And if you were late, they couldn't call you.
Yeah, but you were home though, because there was a level of respect and I think also fear, because the parents definitely put a little.
It's a
bit
fine
of
line.
Fear, exactly.
It's
but
a fine line.
Not a bad thing.
No,
right?
not a bad thing. With my kids, my 13-year-old, he's 6 foot tall. All right, there's going to be a time when he's bigger than me.
Right.
I have to keep that competitive edge over
Of
him.
course.
Kick his
you
ass
go to the
now.
gym, you work out, you keep yourself in shape a little.
Kick his ass now.
Got to
before
get
he's
ready
big
for the
enough to kick
daughter's
your ass.
boyfriends too. You got to put a little intimidation in them too.
That's when you clean the guns.
Yeah, he was on the phone with his girlfriend the other night, and he did a FaceTime. And as soon as I walked in his room, the phone went down, and I said, "Let me say hi to her." And I made sure I took off my pants, pulled up my black socks, and
oh God,
let's do it. Come on, and But anyway, thank you so much, Steve.
That court appearance is pending now.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Steve, for sending that one in. Keep sending in your questions. We will try to get them on the air. And don't forget to check out our Patreon. Go to sufferingpodcast.com. There is a link out there, and you get some special content like Mike's Hot Corner, intro reads, and some advanced episodes.
Behind-the-scenes stuff.
Behind-the-scenes stuff is insane. So, Paul, I know a lot about you. I've done my research about you, but I want you to tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so, born and raised Wayne, New Jersey. Grew up, my brother and I are 5.5 years
Hillside or
apart.
Valley side?
I was Hills.
There you go.
So I was Hills. I had an interest in culinary arts. Ended up going to CIA, Culinary Institute of America. Was a chef for many, many years.
What appealed to you about chef work?
I think it's the physicality, but also the creativity factor. And it's just being able to, I think, do something that people enjoy. It's that gratification of like, I make you something really nice and you
Nothing
enjoy
beats
it,
a good meal. And if you're the pioneer of that good meal.
I grew up with that with my family too. Coming from an Italian family, Sunday dinner was a big thing, and food was always very important. So it was just something that was because it's not something that if I was going to tell you, I would talk you out of being a chef, honestly, because honestly, it's not
a tough
very
life.
Glamorous lifestyle. You're working 12 hours a day. You're on your feet. You're working holidays, weekends. You miss a lot of family functions.
You're working when people are going out.
That's right.
So,
But now, when it comes to family stuff, they want you to cook now too.
Of course,
you're the chef.
of course.
So even when you're off duty, you're...
So and I was lucky enough. I made some changes in my career, and I went more corporate food service. So I was working more Monday through Friday. Had a little more work-life balance. And then I had my own business for many years, did corporate dining, had several locations in northern New Jersey, and I became a father, right? I had 2 kids. I had a daughter, Emily, and I had my son, Jonathan Cimins. He, my daughter was born neurotypical, so we raised her. She was very talkative and chatty and everything, right? And then we look at my son, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 18 months, basically.
How do you diagnose an 18-month-old with autism? What are the signs?
Well, so for him, there was spinning. There was a lot of spinning. He would, spin. He would play with his hair, very, very focused on that. He would position blocks, line them up. There was a lot of quirky behaviors he had. And also words. He had vocabulary at the time. So this is the hard part for me as a father when you talk about suffering, because he was talking. He was developing. We went to the pediatrician, and my wife and I said he seemed a little off. Again, he had some of these quirky behaviors, and we're like, but the doctor said, no, he's fine, right? So this is our pediatrician, and little by little, he would repeat words. Like he would say, like, uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. But that was like a word he used all the time, uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. And he would say it over and over again. So it was just like really odd for us, And little by little, he started regressing and losing his speech. And it literally was like one day the lights kind of went out. And it just stopped. It is common because I've heard it a lot of times in a lot of families. This has happened. And again, we don't know the cause of that, right? But there's some who are born, don't ever speak, and then end up speaking. So it's one of the mysteries of autism, because we really don't know, kind of like the causes.
Go to like speech therapists and all that back then?
Yeah, we did, the speech therapy. And again, when I heard the words, we went to finally get the diagnosis. We had to go to a pediatric neurologist. We took him, and he was the one that told us that my son had autism. And I had no idea what autism was. The only thing I knew, when you mentioned earlier, was like Rain Man.
Yeah.
And Rain Man, again, very high functioning.
You were like, great, I'm gonna make a killing at the blackjack
tables.
tables.
Exactly. And you look at Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise in that movie, and you say, okay, well, is that autism? And that was not what we were seeing, right? And I just remembered a doctor, I think, made a very bold statement. He's not going to be very affectionate. He's not going to love and all those things. So it's like, it's very devastating at that moment.
I'm sure.
And
because as a father, you have this little baby, especially a man. And I hate to say this because it is a masculine thing. When you have your boy,
yeah, it is.
It's not that your daughter is any less important to you, but it's like, this is who's going to carry on my name.
Absolutely. The legacy of the family,
Yeah.
right?
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's what we say. And then, I was a very good athlete, played a lot of sports. So you have a lot of dreams, right? And
Aspirations for your...
yeah, okay, we're going to play baseball. I mean, I was fortunate enough, I went down to spring training and got to play at Yankee baseball camp and do some really cool things as a kid. I was hoping to be able to share that with my son. And then that was not going to be his future. It was devastating.
I'm sure.
And in a way, it was almost like a loss. It was almost like suffering a loss of a loved one because, again, not knowing what the future is going to bring, not knowing a lot. And again, you're talking like 2005. There was very little information about autism out there at that time. There was very little. So we didn't know a lot. And, my wife kind of just shut down. She really didn't deal with it well. I think for me,
But you still have another kid at home that
I
you,
did.
You
Yeah,
gotta,
you have to...
and I think, and most people don't know this because I don't talk about my daughter as much, but my daughter was diagnosed right before that she was legally deaf in both her ears too.
Wow.
So that was like, what does that mean now? But the scary part was that when her brain, the nerve that's connected to her brain, it was like fragmented. And they were afraid as she was going to get older that it was going to separate and possibly she'd be completely deaf. And that was like terrifying. So imagine you got a 5-year-old and like almost a 2.5, 3-year-old. And like you get this news as a parent, and you're just like, and I think with me, it's interesting, some people, start drinking, doing drugs, right? You get depressed, you get down.
Start
For
doubting
me,
God.
yeah, you start having all these. I think for me, I buried myself in my work. I became a workaholic, and work became my drug, I guess you want to say, at that time. Built my business really strong, successful, but I wasn't present for probably about a year or two.
Was it? Do you think it was like drugs and alcohol is running away?
Yeah.
Do you think your job was running away from?
I've heard that before. It's kind of like running away from a prairie fire.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, no, I think that was part of it. Obviously, I was there and providing, right? But that's not enough, right? And so I didn't do a real good job out of the gate, But then I realized that, I need to do something for my son. I need to find out some answers, and that's when I began my quest. And then 2007. We started, even before that, we started going to like support groups. And that was when the first, like, okay, there is a little light at the end of the tunnel. And,
But you now, autism there's a lot of autism diagnosis today.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them.
Yep.
Do you think that is, and again, this is hard to theorize this. Is it just they're identifying it? And when we grew up, like we were talking about earlier, there were kids on the spectrum, because I know autism is a very broad word.
Very vast.
Yeah, I mean, you have high functioning versus nonverbal, all and everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
Was it just it was going undiagnosed for so long and it was always present and we just didn't see it?
I think it was that, and again, I think the detection got a lot better, and we're definitely focused on it a lot more as we provided more services, and we started uncovering what autism is and how we, the goal is obviously there's no cure for autism, right? We don't use the words cure because it's not a disease, and people use that. Right?
I always say yet, and my son taught me that. Remember when we had we brought my son in for an episode, my 13-year-old. I think he was 12 at the time. And it was kind of like, what do you want to do when, I forget what the question was, but he always attached the word yet afterwards. He's like, I want to play professional football. I'm just not a professional football player yet. There is no cure for autism. There was no cure for autism yet. Who knows what the future can hold? And that's where all the research and the early detection comes in, because maybe they'll just unlock.
Well, that's the goal, right? The goal is to make sure, as a parent, I want my son to live the best life he can. So I want to give him all the resources and available. And we tried everything. And when I think back, like how much money we spent on all these different, I call them summer snake oils. We tried just about everything.
But you have to try everything.
And we did. And, I look back and I probably wouldn't change that. And if parents ask me about like, hey, well, what do you think about this treatment? I'm like, well, we tried that. And, we did see some benefits with some of the treatments. Like we did hyperbaric oxygen chamber. He did about 42 dives. We did see an improvement in his sleep and just some cognitive functions, but it definitely didn't, because we were told, hey, this is going to unlock the key, and we've had kids where they start verbalizing and speaking, and that's just not the case.
You had said your wife sort of shut down after the diagnosis of your son. Did you replay the whole pregnancy in your head? Like, what did there's a lot of self-blame and stuff. What did we do? What happened?
Yeah. What did we get exposed to? Were we treating with the grass with weed killers and all this? I mean, we went through the whole gamut of everything.
Well, there's something, I'm going to put it into perspective for our audience. Our audience, take something as simple as social media. You'll have one post that hits. Okay, and then you go back and you dissect that post and you say, what made it hit? And I always thought about that with parents who have a child with special needs, any special need, not even autism specific. And they go back and they dissect and say, what did we do? You take a lot of personal responsibility where it just, there may not even be a cause.
No.
Yeah.
No, and there's genetic factors, right? Obviously there could be a predisposed thing and that could trigger something. Again, we just don't know. We just don't know.
And nobody knows.
No.
That's the problem with it right now.
No.
So what changed though? What changed in your attitude towards your wife is included in this?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
If we can.
Yep.
What changed in the attitude to say I got it? Like, was it a day? Was it an event? Or was it a process?
There was an organization back then called COSAC, and we went to one of the support group meetings, and that was kind of sparked for me personally. That's what was the spark for me that ignited to start Hope Saves the Day and Autism Radio in the future, because there were people talking about it as a parent, right? The struggles, the challenges, the thing is, when you have a child, right? Typically, your child's going to sleep. Maybe they don't sleep for the first year or two, right? And then finally they do sleep, right? Or sleep through the night, right? Our situation was almost 13 years where this child did not sleep at all. And that was like torturous, for us, right? So literally, he was finally fully potty trained at the age of 13. He was in diapers up until that point.
Yeah.
You imagine that. And then the worst part, now he's big enough where, he obviously goes to the bathroom in his diaper. Now he's smearing this on the walls and stuff in the middle of the night. So now you're cleaning up shit, basically. And, that's a stressful thing to deal with that day after day and still be able to get up, go to work in the morning. My wife's still able to do, her tasks and go to work too, because she was trying to work at one point.
Because it is, even though he's a child with special needs, you are still a parent, and there are some universal frustrations with parents.
Absolutely.
You're like, come on, not again. And it doesn't mean you don't love them, but you do get frustrated.
You do.
And if you don't mind me asking, it had to take a toll on your marriage also.
Oh, I put a tremendous strain. Oh, it absolutely. Probably even till this day, like still we're working through things. It's not easy. But it's a challenging thing. It's just something that you have to do. And people say, "Oh, I don't know how you do it," but you have no choice.
You have to. You're a parent.
You just have to do it.
That's what our friend Derek said all the time. He's how do you go on tour? He said, "I'm a parent. I'm a parent first, and I'm a musician second.
Right.
I brought this child into the world. I have to provide for him. I have to do everything I can for him.
It's a responsibility.
Yeah, it's a responsibility.
Well, no child ever asked to be born. Right. You brought them.
Yeah, we
willingly.
wanted to have kids. My wife and I, wanted to have at least 2 children. We were thinking to have 3 was our goal, but then after Jonathan, we said no, we're not having any more kids.
I had a friend of mine, because I had gotten a vasectomy very shortly after my second was born, because I was done. I was getting older. I just didn't want to have any more children, and I remember somebody saying to me, "Well, what if there's something wrong with this one?" Because he was young. What if there's something?
Right.
Motherfucker, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean if there's something wrong with him? I'm just going to throw him away and start over. Throw him away and start over.
Right.
Like what? No. I almost grabbed the guy by the neck because I got so aggravated at that situation. Because they got other needs or they're not perfect in your eyes, doesn't mean I'm going to love them any less.
No.
So
but it is a fear though.
Yeah.
That is a real fear.
Oh, yeah.
And the hard part is I hate to say it like this, but when my cousins or family members or friends are having children, I do get fearful for that because I don't want them to go through what I went through. You know, and I really do pray for that.
You're tossing the dice every time you choose to have a child. You really are.
It's true.
You never know. I mean, it could be something as simple as the cord gets wrapped around the neck and cerebral palsy sets in, and that's what it is. But even so, I know my cousin has Down syndrome, okay? And I know many parents of Down syndrome parents. I've never heard one say that they were unhappy with their children. I know a lot of parents with autism, they love their children probably more than I love my children, which I don't think is possible. But
well, because it's the time you got to spend with them and the extra effort that you have to give that child. You know, it brings a closer bond. You know, like we were saying before, we were talking about Special Olympics. I know a lot of Special Olympics parents who do nothing but dote over their kids.
Sure.
Right? You know, it's like the greatest thing in the world to them.
Now, your son Jonathan, have you ever had it measured what his mental age is?
Yeah, so if you had to categorize him, probably more like 8 or 9 years old, like in that range, you know, as far as his intellectual abilities.
Well, it just gives people a gauge of how they interact with the world.
And he's 19 now, so just to give you perspective.
How do you communicate? Like, is he able to tell you like when he wants something or when he needs something?
He's good with verbal cues, like somewhat. Like what I mean by verbal cues is like he'll point, you know, and sometimes he'll mouth things, and I can kind of understand him. He leads a lot of times by hand. He'll pull you and knows he's able to tell you what he wants. I mean, we do have a very challenging life because we have to lock everything in the house. Our refrigerator or freezers actually have locks on them. Our cabinets have locks on them.
The Netflix account?
No, not the Netflix account.
So no, he was watching our friend Derek's child, and he got a hold and ordered how much in movies?
Couple $100 worth of movies on an iPad. He just had to go.
Shame on Derek for leaving young Derek with Mike.
Yeah,
shame on
that
him.
was a mistake.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So
getting all these alerts on your phone and all these movies that are.
Oh my God.
Is he self-aware?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. You know, I think it all depends on his state of mind. We went through a pretty traumatic experience with him last year. For whatever reason, he decided to get up and get out of the house in the middle of the night.
Wow.
And he wouldn't come in the house. I was 2:00 in the morning, and literally I'm like calling him. He's not coming. He's running around the yard. He's running away from me. And this lasted for hours. Like we're outside in the middle of the night, and it was like,
it a game for him?
It didn't seem like a game because he almost seemed like he was, I don't know if he was hurting or what he was going through, but it was almost like, I mean, the doctor ended up diagnosing him with like a manic episode. And I don't know what triggered that. I have no idea. I mean, there's some correlations. They said, well, maybe because he was going through puberty, like really, like, you know, he started growing facial hair. So his testosterone just starting to spike a lot at that age. Because he developed later as a child. It seemed like he was like delayed even like, you know, developing. So is, you know, I don't know, but we went through this for a while. The worst night was I was coming home from work. I was actually not coming home from work. I was coming home from a meeting, and my wife calls me and she says, "Where are you?" She says, "Where?" She says, "We're in the hospital." And I'm like, "We're in the hospital." And he had, I guess, some kind of a epileptic seizure.
That's what I was going to ask, if he had any seizures
and,
at all.
that never happened to us. And my daughter happened to look over, and he was under the covers, and he was like twitching and stuff. And he had a grand mal seizure, basically. Of course, took him to the hospital. My wife took him. I wasn't even home. I felt so bad not being there for that moment too, because it's like I should have been home, but I was actually at my charity like board meeting, you know, which we do annually and quarterly. And I was like, I felt so guilty not being there that night when it happened, because it was like 11 o'clock at night this happened. But then shortly after that, he was still running out of the house, like continuously. But the one night she called me, I was coming home from work again, and she said, "He's gone." I said, "What do you mean he's gone?" She's like, "I can't find him." And obviously I'm driving. I can't get home any faster, but driving fast, obviously I'm speeding. I know you guys are officers, so
sometimes there's good reasons.
Anyway, but I was getting home as quick as I could, and I did call my good friend who happens to live near me, who used to work for Passaic County Sheriff's Department, and we do have the Project Lifesaver. I work with Chief Gene Saunders, actually We're one of the licensed organizations in New Jersey. And he put out, some calls and said, hey, I got people on standby if you need to come out. And I said, okay, well, let me, I'm almost there. I was home. And probably like before I even got home, my wife found him. And how she found him was, I know, traumatic for her, where just envision this, that she's driving down the road. There's a pickup truck facing her, stopped in the street on a pretty busy road, Berkshire Valley. I don't know if you know where that is.
Yeah.
He's walking. She sees someone standing in front of the road, which turned out to be my son. And she's pulling up, and he's in the road. And this guy was nice enough to stop and try to contain him, but he was not coming either. Yeah. And thank God the guy stopped, number one. And number two, nobody came and hit him, because he could have been killed very easily. I mean, there was people drive pretty fast on that road. Yeah. But that was like traumatic for her. I was home at least with her, but she was very much shaken up. And I don't think she's truly ever got over that, because a couple weeks later, he was at CVS and he took off on her, and she panicked. Like, so I think, she needs to probably, address that on her own level. Again, I don't want to talk too much about that, but it's a very sensitive topic, obviously, but it's very real. It's a very real thing. It's a very,
because that thought's always in your mind now too.
Yeah.
What if he bolts now? What if he takes off?
Right.
What.
Well, you have a whole new set of worries. Like every parent has worries, but you have worries compounded to the nth degree.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like, you probably suffer from some kind of PTSD, I'm sure,
doubt.
And it's probably real in there, and, your emotions go up, they go down, and you're always like on guard. It feels like you're always like waiting for the other shoe to drop, because you're like, what is he going to do? What is he going to get into? And this might sound funny for some of the listeners that might be listening, but like, he has an obsession with soap, but like not in a good way, where like I'll buy at BJ's a gallon of the Palmolive soap, put it on the counter. Next thing you know, turn around, it's all spilt out, the entire gallon.
Is it the texture?
Oh, he loves it.
He loves the texture.
But like, he'll dump it without even thinking about it. And you get mad, of course, like you said, you get mad, and you're like, Jonathan, what are you doing? And you get upset at him. You like yell at him, and he gets scared. Now he's scared. He's like, oh, what did I? And I'm like, what did you do, dude? Like, but the worst was, I remember my daughter bought some very expensive like shampoo and conditioner, and when he got a hold of that, and that went all over the place, dude, done.
But you still have to take care of his bathe, or does he bathe himself?
Oh yeah, no, I'm the bather every night. He's got to have his shower, and he has a routine, and I have to have a towel on my shoulders, because he's very protective of his eyes. Got to constantly wiping his eyes, because he doesn't like water in his face. So I have to do it a very certain way. My wife tries to do it; she does it okay, but he's more comfortable with me, I think. But again, it's you think you got a 19-year-old kid, and you got to bathe him. He's not a boy anymore. He's become a young man, and it's like, every day it's like, that's my job, is to bathe him every night. And then obviously, his routine, he's got to have his routine. We have a glow turtle that glows up, and it's got to be at the end of the bed on this other turtle, and he can't not have it, otherwise he gets upset. So he's very regimented in his sleep.
They're very routine regimented.
Oh, yeah.
It's unbelievable.
You can't break it.
Yeah.
And it's hard. And that's one of the things like we try to do with Autism Radio too, is like do a date night where we'll have professionals come into people's homes and watch their children, so that the parents can get a night out, because it's hard.
Yeah.
Because even like for my own family, like to watch my son is not easy.
But
and, they're getting older now too.
So you have a young baby at home, and you are going to be a forever parent.
Yeah.
You're always a forever parent, but you're going to be a forever parent of an 8-year-old.
A caregiver. Yeah.
A caregiver. And, young parents with infants at home, they rarely get a night out, or especially when at a certain level, they rarely get a night out. But does that ever weigh on your mind, as far as that's your life?
Yeah, it definitely does. I think, sometimes I get frustrated. Maybe I get a little upset once in a while. I mean, I'm a pretty positive guy. I definitely, try to make lemonade out of lemons in my life, right? But I am human, and there is certain moments where, it definitely affects you, where you're like, I just want to have a normal life like my friends or your neighbor, and be able to just go out once in a while.
Like family dinners, like going out to dinner.
But then
the four of you allowed. Like,
yeah, we
candy
do.
action?
We did. Well, so perfect example. My wife's birthday just passed on Sunday, March 12th. So wish my wife happy birthday. She's listening to the show again. But no, we got out to go to dinner, and he went out to dinner. And he was very good.
You got to take him to Grand Saloon.
Yeah,
Grand Saloon in Clifton is one of our sponsors.
Oh, really?
Fantastic food, very low key. He might do well there, but
well,
aside from that, it's good. As a chef, you're going to like it because it's good food.
All right, well, we'll definitely have to check that out. But you do. When you go out, it's like sometimes you don't want to go out because you might act up or start yelling.
Your anxiety's got to be up.
It does.
What happened? You're always thinking about like the what happened.
Yeah.
What happens if this happens? What happens if that happens?
I've learned to just kind of deal with it. I mean, I used to feel bad because I didn't want to ruin someone else's evening, by him making noise or doing something. But I do feel most people are more understanding today than they were probably 10 years ago. Because I remember in Disney World, true story.
I was just going to say vacations too.
We were on vacation, and he was probably 5 years old, and he was making a lot of noise, and we were in line, and someone said something. So now imagine this. You got Mama Bear. You know how Mama Bears are. And Papa Bear, too, when it comes to our kids, right? My wife says something like to this gentleman who said something, and I don't think he really meant anything by it. He's like, oh, somebody's excited. But it was like, but she took it the wrong way, and she said something, and I kind of was like, diffused the situation, but I was like, I don't want to get in a fight in Disney World and get kicked out of the park. But she got very, very sensitive, right? And I think we are sensitive to our kids in general, but then I think to the 10th level with special needs kids, we're just that much more protective of them because they're not able to fight for themselves and protect themselves or defend themselves really a lot, so that's a scary thing.
But I have to side with your wife on that one. If you're going to Disney World and you get annoyed by little children, really?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's Disney World. It's supposed to be for children, although a lot of adults use it.
It's like being annoyed by Mickey Mouse, so you go to Disney World.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like mice. Like we talked about fear tonight. I don't like mice, but I'm going to go to Disney World.
Yeah, well, he definitely turned around. He stopped after that. I was like, hey, if it's your best interest, just to turn around and enjoy your day.
There's a lot of pain and suffering that goes into caring for an autistic child.
Yes,
but there are some great things as well.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think about my kids when they were 8 years old. Best time ever. Yeah. They were my best friend. They're my buddy, and I'm always their hero. Now I got a teenager.
It's different. It's changed.
Yeah. So what's some good things that have come out of your son, your relationship with your son?
Yeah. So we have like some really cool routines. So like normally, you think you take your son to play ball or something like that, but he likes to go to the recycling center on the weekends. But he's like awesome at it. Like, and I mean awesome at it. He does all the work. I don't do anything. All I am is the chauffeur, basically drive him there. He takes everything, puts in the car, organizes everything. And then the guys there love him because he's become kind of like part of the crew now. Yeah. So we can stay there for a couple hours, and he'll throw cardboard in the cardboard. He'll take people's things out of their trunks. I mean, he loves that. So they let him do that every weekend, which is kind of cool. And they say, hey, Jonathan, and he gets all excited. He sees him, fist bumps him and stuff. It's pretty cool. So that's like a really cool moment. And then my good friend, who actually is a state trooper, has a martial arts school, and we started a martial arts program for kids with autism. And my son loves the martial arts. So that was a cool thing because I was a martial artist my whole life as a teenager myself up until my adulthood. I was able to at least do that activity with him, which was really cool. So I think it's finding an activity to connect to your child, no matter what that is, because there are things we can do. You can't, you got to, again, I always say to parents that have that new diagnosis, I said, I give you 24 hours to feel sorry for yourself. Now, 24 hours. After 24 hours, it's about focusing on making your child have the best life it can possibly be.
Well, I love that concept of a job. And I know it's not a job for him, but it sort of is. Yeah. It's a purpose. I go to a coffee shop and they employ special needs.
We were talking about that. Yes.
My favorite place in the entire world. I don't give a crap. As a matter of fact, I bought a coffee mug from them today. It was like $18. I was like, whoa. But,
But it's a good cause.
It's a good cause. Yes. And they're so happy. They all know, all the kids know my name. I don't go in there every day, but I go in there probably twice a week.
Right.
And they all know my name. They're happy to see me. You go to one of your local chain coffees.
Yeah, Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts or something. Yeah.
You are a pain in the ass to them.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, what's greater than that? and they're making money, they're serving a purpose.
Yeah.
Their parents are happy to have them involved in
absolutely.
something because
Absolutely.
it gives them a little bit of normalcy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It just gives you that, even if it's just a couple hours, right? It gives you that little reprieve of like, hey, you know what, this is awesome.
Well, we talk about it all the time. Like when you get in one of those moods, you got to get into your safe place. You know, find something where you're comfortable, whether it be the gym or something like that.
Yeah.
The recycling place is like the safe place for your son.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
that's
it
where
really is.
he can go and
Yeah.
be productive.
And guys are amazing with him. They love him. And it's funny, if I don't come Saturday and Sunday, they say, "Where were you yesterday?" They literally they look forward to seeing him, which is really cool.
I'll bring all my cycles up to your house now.
What you do for your son in the recycling center is amazing. Think about what you're doing to the guys who are working at the recycling center.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're working hard, and I'm sure a lot of them, especially on the weekends, don't want to come into work
Sure.
until they see Jonathan.
Oh yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, well, wait a minute, he wants to do, are you kidding me? He wants to do what I do?
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah, he motivates them. He
Yeah.
really does. He really does. I had a couple guys that, for Christmas they gave him little things, and that was really special.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it since he's probably for the last 5-6 years.
It was just a fluke. You took him there one day to get him out of the house.
I said, let's try this, and I handed him the bucket, hey, dump this in the paper, hey, do this and that, and then now he literally knows exactly what to do, and I don't have to do anything. Like literally, he unloads the car himself and puts everything back in the car, closes the trunk, and he's like, okay, we're good to go, Dad, let's go. Unless he has
I
more
was going to
work
ask you to drive there one day, too. Dad, give me the keys.
Yeah.
So the biggest fear I see with any parent with special needs, as I look at it,
Yep.
is one day you're not going to be
Yes,
here. Your
absolutely.
wife is not going to be here.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen? Like I know with my children, if I do my job,
Yep.
they're on their own. They can do their thing. Is that something that creeps into your mind from time to time?
A lot. Yeah, probably more than it should. But it's reality as we get older in life, right? And then, of course, we never know how long we're on this earth anyway. But yeah, that is probably one of my deepest, darkest fears. Not a lot of things scare me in my life, but that scares
It's got
me.
to be something that weighs on you constantly.
That scares me. And having a daughter, I don't want her to have that responsibility. And I've verbalized that to her multiple times. I don't know if she's going to listen or not, but I know, he needs to, we need to find a place for him where he's going to be safe. And, unfortunately, you're just going to never know. Nobody's going to take as better care as obviously as parents, right?
Absolutely.
So, that's always a fear, right? Because, I cook for him. We do a lot of things. Actually, I taught him some culinary stuff. He's been doing some knife cuts now safely with a cut glove on, and teaching him some culinary stuff. Not really cooking, but more like prep work. But again, we do a lot of things together every weekend, when I'm off and I have a chance to connect with him. So
Now, is your daughter like the protective older sister?
she's very protective.
Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah.
Too much. And we butt heads because we're similar personalities, so we do butt heads. She's a good kid, great kid. You talk to anybody, they love her. She's smart. She's thoughtful. Again, you talk about, you hear the stories like, oh my God, your daughter is just amazing.
It's a great feeling, isn't it?
Which is the best, But then at home, she gives me grief, and we fight like,
People say that all the
Yeah.
time. Your kids are such.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
such. Your
I'm
son's
like-
such a gentleman. Your daughter's so sweet.
Oh yeah,
Come home with me
come
one
home
night.
and live with her for a week, and you want to throw her out of the house.
So
But,
when you decided to start Hope Saves the Day in Autism Radio, what was your hope when you first got into that?
yeah, so Hope Saves the Day. Again, podcasting really new, 2007.
You got in there
went-
early.
Went first, again, the support group. I actually had shoulder surgery. I was sitting on the couch. My buddy's a musician, and I told him, I said, hey, I got this idea. I was thinking of starting this podcast. He's like, oh, yeah, podcast is pretty new. And he goes, yeah, I can set you up. And we set up a Podbean account way, way back. And it was like brand new hosting site. We had to pay for it, and it wasn't free or anything. And so we said, okay, we'll put it on there. And so I just started sharing my story about, some of the struggles and the challenges I was going through as a parent. And, had a couple hundred people start listening, and, it just kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And finally, then my brother had a website. He owned Grappler's Quest, which is a very large mixed martial art competition. And he posted our site, used to put our show, and a lot of people really loved the show. And then, it was more about personal experiences. It wasn't about like the scientific or the the news of what's going on or having guests, which the show merged into that later. But it really, the foundation was just as a parent, like sharing those vulnerability stories with others that, hey, you know what, you're not alone in this journey. And I wanted to be someone to share the dark side of the life sometimes.
Absolutely.
But by sharing the dark brings the light, and I know Kevin relates to this 100%.
So it sounds like that group therapy that you started going to is a continuation. And this is where the similarities
absolutely. I was just thinking the same thing.
Us really weigh in, because this show here is a extension of group therapy that Mike and I were both in the same place. And that's what it sounds like Autism Radio is for you.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's really true, powerful thing, right? I mean, and the name Hope Saves the Day too, which is very meaningful because hope does save a day and save your life possibly, because hope is one of the most powerful things you could probably give to a parent with a child.
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can't, when you have a child with autism, you can't really, I don't want to say give advice, because every child's different.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So
absolutely.
You could just tell them what you went through.
I just
and hope
share
they
with
pick up, hope they pick something up.
And
off
every
of that.
child is different, right?
You can't go up to a parent and say, do it this way, do it that way. Everything's different. Every situation is different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll leave it to the experts. Again, we have a lot of experts that now, I've been on my program for years now. You can name, Temple Grandin, obviously she's an autism expert, right? We know she's top 100 most influential people in the world, right? But she's diagnosed with autism, and she shared her story with us, which again, she can teach parents or individuals with autism. So that's very powerful.
Yeah, he did say that he had Jenny McCarthy on. Maybe that's one guest that we could get.
I can't get a Jenny McCarthy anywhere near you. Look at the look in your eye. It's like a predator.
Oh, jeez. Don't you want to creep around now?
Yeah. You want to give her the creeper eyes.
Yeah. She doesn't listen to our show anyway. So.
But the hope you're giving to people, just in the fact of your vulnerability. How many parents they just don't want to talk about it? I mean, if you look back, I'm a South Jersey kid.
Okay.
All right, and you look at the story behind the Jersey Devil.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you know the story behind the Jersey Devil?
Yep.
So Mrs. Leeds had 13 children. Their 12 children were so bad she wished the third one was going to be a devil. Popped out of his stomach, started terrorizing the area.
Right.
The reality of the Leeds family, which is still a very big, prominent family down there, is by the time she was having her 13th child, she was probably a little bit older. As we know, women who have children later in life, there's a higher likelihood of some sort of disability.
Yeah.
And in those days, when you had a child with disabilities, you didn't tell nobody. There was no support groups. There was no autism radio. No. So you hid the child away.
Right.
And what they think happened, from what I've read, is when the child hit 13, 14, became a man, it was probably grotesque. It was probably deformed by their standards, broke out. And what's the first thing it's going to do? It's going to look for food. So it started killing sheep or killing livestock and things like that. And that's how the myth grew.
Right.
But look how far we as a human race have come to now. We have programs such as yours identifying the problem, putting it out there in the limelight, and saying, no, we can work with this. We don't have to hide this away anymore.
Absolutely.
That's important. That's important work that you're doing. And out of all the shows that you've done over, 16 years now? Or 16 years now. Was there one that stuck out as like, wow, like really eye-opening?
The Suffering Podcast?
Yeah, besides the Suffering Podcast. That's a given.
Yeah. It's a great show, guys. No, I that's tough. That is tough.
Not to downplay any of your previous
your
other guests.
You mean guest, or you mean personal, like something I shared maybe?
Either or, because there's moments in this show where Mike and I we'll call each other on the way home, and we're like, okay, whoa,
wow, yeah, that was a good one,
right.
And I'm sure there's those moments that you have recording your show.
Yeah, I think I shared a pretty dark moment. My personal story with my son. We were just going through, again, really hard times with him every day and every night. And, you talk, this is obviously a very sensitive subject, but you think, just talk about suicide, right? You start thinking dark thoughts, and your mind goes to places. And of course, that changed for me very quickly. But started talking about that, and I must have got probably 1,000 emails saying I've gone through that 100 times. And I
What's
thought I
the
was
suicide
crazy.
rate for children, or parents of children with special needs?
I don't know what the rate is. I know that divorce is like 70%. End up in
Damn.
divorce. Yeah, it's very high for divorce. I don't know about suicide, but
Welcome to the police world.
yeah, it's rough though. It's definitely there's a lot. You hear it a lot, and you hear these terrible stories where the father takes the mother, the family, and with him too, which is awful. But you do go to a very dark place because you can't sometimes cope with it, right? It's hard to cope with it, and I think we talked about this, Kevin, on our show when you were on. Men are really bad at expressing our feelings. We just don't know how to fucking do it.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, we don't know how to do it.
So it's the macho male syndrome.
And it's hard. It's hard to really talk about it, but you go through different ways of, like, I was saying one day, I'm like thinking about different ways how it would end my life, right? And this was what I was going through. But like part of me is like, I don't want to shoot myself. I don't want to do this. I don't want, you think about all these different ways, and you almost talk yourself out of it. But then you think, like, what am I, crazy? Like, this is crazy thoughts, but they're there.
You go to
that, and they're real.
You go to that dark place.
They're real.
And people don't get that. People who have never been in that position, people don't understand because they're trying to rationalize an irrational thought, which is impossible to do.
Yep.
People don't understand that you're not thinking about what you're leaving behind. You're not thinking about the good things in life. No. You're in this place where nothing matters, and you're focused on a task. And for a short time, you become somewhat insane.
Yeah. You lose touch reality.
You start thinking about ways of doing it and places of doing it.
Yeah. You think, oh my God, I don't want my family to find me. Do I want to do it in the woods? I live in the woods. I could go out there, I can hang myself. I could do this. You literally start playing it out, almost planning it.
But then you're
Been
like,
there, done that.
I don't want to be food for animals.
No,
I don't want them to find me half eaten.
But that's a good thing because it actually stops you from doing it, right?
Yeah.
So what's the disconnect there is, like, some people will go through with it, right? That's so what holds you back, right? So I got, and this was powerful because I had, again, probably 1,000 emails come through, and I had one mom, single mom from Texas, right? And she says, I go through this every day. So I listened to you talk, and I felt like I was okay. And she goes, what I mean by that, and I'll never forget this. What I mean by that is that these thoughts are not so abnormal because you're sharing your story and I'm going through the same thing. And it also made me realize that I have a bigger purpose to live for my child, because that's what I shared with the story. Because again, I have to be for my child. Again, just mentioned it earlier. My greatest fear is not being here for my child. So why would I commit suicide?
So why would you commit suicide?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is probably the saving grace, right? When you talk about it. And, obviously I believe in God, and I do believe that we're supposed to be here and do our duties.
Do God's work until God calls you.
Until it's my day and he says, okay, this date, such and such date, your time is up, right? It's not for me to determine it. So,
but it's tough being in that dark hole, isn't it?
It really is.
When you get down that road and like you said, you're starting to think about ways of doing it and where to do it. And
absolutely.
And it's just...
Absolutely. And honestly, I never talked publicly. It's probably the first time other than my show talking about it, because even just talking about it takes me back to how that feeling was. It was bad.
But what it does when you let that stuff out and you let yourself be vulnerable, it humanizes you. Yeah. You're not just a talking head anymore.
Right.
You're a real person.
Right.
You're putting normal emotions. And guess what? Everybody gets down, and everybody has their own moments when they get stuck inside their head. But it's how you get out of those and you continue to move forward. That's what really saves the day with your hope.
Absolutely.
And it really makes you stronger.
It does. No, 100%. Yep. Autism has taught me to be a better person, to love more, right? And patience. That's probably the biggest one.
The patience one.
It's a big one.
The patience is huge.
If you were to see a parent who has a young child or an infant recently diagnosed with autism, out of your own life, what do you think you would teach them, or what do you think you would tell them? What's some advice you would give them?
Well, first, I'd like to hear from them. I kind of like them to tell me a little bit about themselves and about their story, right, and what they're going through. So case by case, I can give them some advice. Obviously, I don't consider myself an expert, although people say I am an expert on the subject.
But
because we're
it's
parents.
advice
But
that you went through.
yeah,
You tell them
and
the
I'll
way
tell
you
them,
dealt with
this
it.
is what I would have
Yeah.
done differently, or this is what I did, and this actually worked well. You know, a lot of children have sensitivities to food, right? So what I like to do is I always recommend bringing the child into the process of making the food, because I really do think that makes a difference. Because if they are part of the process, they're more likely to try it. It excites them more.
Yeah.
And that's actually led to a lot of our successes. Well, I'm actually finishing up my book. Hopefully it'll be done one of these days, but been working on it for 5 years.
You got to get us a copy, because
yeah.
we become this library in
Oh,
here
really?
of authors. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
all right. Well, my
Seems
book,
like
my
everybody-
book. So I have recipes. I wrote a lot of recipes because I went with the gluten-free, casein-free diet, which was very popular thing back in the day. I wrote about a couple hundred recipes, which I used to post on my website for free. But now I have them all in this basically book, which has stories with my son. And again, you have to create activities. It's a little more work, but I'm telling you, the payoff is huge.
Yeah.
Because once I started doing these activities with my son, cooking with him and getting the interest and letting him see, even just touch the carrots and touch the things, and then I taste it with him, and then he would taste it, because typically kids will mimic what they say, right? So again, it's having a lot of patience, because he might just take a little bit, but he's not going to eat much, and he's done with it. Don't push him.
Yeah.
Don't ever push too much on your kids, right? But the other thing was,
we should take some advice from that with our children.
I never catered to
Right.
him either, though. So that's the other thing. It's like I did go a little bit old school, because, again, my mother said, this is dinner, this is what you get, and you don't get anything else. Parents today are a little too much
My wife does it.
flexible.
It drives me
You
out.
know,
It drives me out of my mind.
Oh, we don't want to eat this. I'll make Mike a hamburger. I'll make him a hot dog, or I'll make him chicken nuggets. And
No,
like,
you're eating that.
no, and you know what? That's what's wrong with the picture, because you're setting up that child for failure. Because if you're catering to them and then they turn around, they say, well, my son only eats chicken nuggets. Well, that's because probably that's what's easy, because we had painful nights where we would sit at the table and try to get him to eat, and he wouldn't eat. But eventually he ate. He's not going to starve.
If they're hungry,
Eventually
they're gonna eat.
he
Yeah.
will eat.
See, that's how I knew I
And it was
wasn't
a little bit-
autistic.
That was a little bit of tough love, right? That was a little bit of tough love. And so that was not easy, and some parents might not agree with that philosophy, but we did do that with him, and we would lay out the same foods, but I would just present it differently to him. So it's not like I'm cooking separate meals, but I'm presenting it differently. And I could do that as a chef, because I could, I was able to present it differently.
See, I, being rock-headed, would always outweight my parents. If I didn't want to eat something, they're like, all right, you're sitting at the table. And I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right.
Well, my mother would put it in the fridge and put it out the next day. So
All right.
my mother was old school.
And guess what? I would have sat there that day.
Yeah.
Now, where can our audience find you?
So obviously they can go to autismradio.org. Of course, our podcast, Hope Saves the Day, is on all the different platforms, Spotify, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio. Of course, they can go to the website, which, of course, our show plays once a week.
Or Instagram as well?
Yeah, we're on Instagram. I'm not great at social media. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a social media guru.
Me and you both.
You're actually better than me, guys. But I'm starting to do the Instagram the last year. I'm a little behind. But we do have a pretty good Facebook following. We're probably going to
Instagram is Hope Saves the Day.
no, Instagram is the official Autism Radio. And then we have a Autism Radio Facebook page as well, where people can find out about more about us. So
You don't have to write this down, everybody. Well, it'll all be in our show notes. Check it out. Everything will be listed there. And, we're coming to the end of this thing here. And I always try to end with the same thing, because if you go through suffering, such as, a lot of people are going to listen to this and say, I can't imagine how you do this. But unless you learn something from it, it's really a wasted opportunity. So what do you think your suffering of being a parent with an autistic child has taught you?
That's a big question. I always think a couple different things. Number one, it's made me 100%, I said, better person. It's definitely made me be more compassionate and empathetic towards others.
Patient.
And patient. I think those are probably the biggest ones for me. But I think Hope Saves the Day, Autism Radio, which I mentioned, are also the way I channel some of the challenges I deal with, right?
It's therapeutic.
So it's very therapeutic to me because
absolutely.
helping others actually helps heal your soul. And I do believe that. And I think you guys are doing that really well as well, because you're sharing a very personal story, very tragic story, which could have been worse, right? But it was still a tragic story that you're sharing, which is very powerful. And you're helping so many people.
So women and men deal with, we talk about men not
Yes.
being able to let go of their emotions. Women practice self-care by going and getting their hair and nails and toes done.
Yeah.
And men, at least for me anyway, and it seems like for you, and I'm pretty sure it's for Mike, our self-care is sitting in rooms like this, having these discussions and really getting it out. Because guess what? At the end of the day, when I get it out and I get it off my chest, I feel better. And I'm not going to speak for you, but I think that's pretty much.
Well, you know, and we talk about it all the time. I mean, I only live a half hour from here. Those rides home are so exhausting. You know, just sitting here listening to what people are going through, it takes a lot out of you, you know.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's therapeutic for you, getting it off your shoulders.
Absolutely.
It's therapeutic for us too. But those rides home, it's like I'm in a daze. Before I know it, I'm even home. Like, hey, how the hell did I get here?
Right.
Really puts your life into perspective.
Yeah.
It really
It does. And I think, you know, but I always look at it like this. There's always someone that has it worse out there, right, too.
That's
and
a
I
great
hear
perspective.
and I hear the stories that are told to me, just like if, you know, again, you say, okay, I have a tough situation, and you listen to someone else share their story with me, and then you're like, wow. You know, and I've been fortunate enough, again, Autism Radio, a nonprofit 501c3. We did Hope for the Holidays. We picked 12 families that I got to go to their houses and deliver presents. Santa comes and elves come, and it's a very cool thing that we do. Again, we helped about 135 families total this year, but 12 families we select that we go to their homes and give them a little more of a holiday experience and some, you know, fun and gifts too. We give them real help and hope for the holidays. And you know, you see some of the conditions of some of the children that are there. They have not only the cognitive challenges, but they're physically, you know, they have physical limits too. They're in wheelchairs,
Wheelchair bound.
They're in beds. They can't get out of a bed, and it's just like you see that, and it really like resonates. It's like, you know, as bad as obviously sometimes I look at myself. Okay, we have challenges, but then you see them, and you're like, wow, well, you know, we're actually pretty lucky because we could always be a lot worse.
Yeah.
So that I do use that as a powerful tool and sometimes it centers you a little bit too. You know, there's always somebody out there going through something worse than you.
Well, anytime you can say it could always be worse, then it can really.
Oh, absolutely.
Anytime
Absolutely.
you can say that as a good day.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you so much for coming in.
Well,
with
thank
us
you, guys.
today. This is amazing.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you for being you, man. I mean, you're a special person. You really are.
Thank you.
And like I said, being involved in Special Olympics like I am, I see a lot of people, you know, like you that are kind and compassionate and really have that love for that child. Where I'm sure there's some other families out there that really don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. They'll bury their head in the sand and they rather not deal with the whole thing. And, you know, that's one thing I try to do is to give people hope and help and support that they need. You know, we try to be, again, grassroots charity that's kind of filling some of the gaps. So,
well, listen, anything you're doing, make sure you reach out to us. We'll get involved. You know, once you're here, you're part of our family. So we try to help out in any way we can.
And likewise to you guys too. Very fortunate enough. There's no meetings by accident. I think Kevin and I said it to each other, but it's true. Everybody met for a reason.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I appreciate you, Paul. Thank you so much for coming in.
thank you.
Man, you got me crack my back just cracked like 4 times. That's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast. As always, let's think about all the stuff that we learned. We want our children to have a better life than we had. No child ever asked to be born. Purpose is living for something bigger than yourself, but most importantly, it's hope saves the day. That's going to do it for this episode of the Suffering Podcast. Check out popple.com. Get your digital business card. Don't forget to follow us on all social media, TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Follow Mike at Mike_Failace. Follow me at Real Kevin Donaldson. And, of course, follow the Suffering Podcast. And we're going to see you on the next episode.